Welcome to the Black Women's World Podcast. Welcome to Black Women's World, where Black women vibe and thrive together. And if you ain't a Black woman, you'll get to know at least one. Because this Black Women's World, my Black woman's world, is whatever I say it is, simply because I am. So welcome, SistaNistas and SistaNista lovers. We're here for you. Much love and peace. Welcome to Black Women's World Podcast. That's the BWWP, y'all. And I am your favorite podcast host, TracyMac. Welcome all my SistaNistas and SistaNista lovers around the world. SistaNistas are Black women who know how to do the darn thing. And SistaNista lovers are those who love us. So all are welcome here. Listen, this month, the month of February, in the United States, we celebrate Black History Month. Now, y'all know like I know that we should have more than just a month, and that anything Black people have done in this country, Black history and American history, should be synonymous. And we should, in order to catch up, because we've been left out a lot of times, and even have a current deliberate erasure happening in our country to erase us from history, or at least the true aspects of history, the good, bad, and the ugly. So I believe we should be talking about Black history 366 days a year, 25 hours a day, 8 days a week. We got some catching up to do. And I began to think about that I just don't want to keep Black history in a month or a day or about a particular person, or keep the same names, those notable names that I don't want to mention at this time, because if you just sit back and think, you probably will already know which names are more notable or more frequently spoken about when we talk about Black history in this country. Even with women, there are specific names that they taught us in school, or that we hear about in our Black history services, our Black history events and things like that. These specific names just keep coming up. But I want to take the opportunity to mention a name that I didn't even know about until a few years ago. And when I heard her name and began to delve into a lot of what she'd done, and I was like, this was a SistaNista for real. And there's so many ways I could identify with who she is and some of the things she did. Nowhere near on the scale as of yet. But I want to share with you, and I want to say her name, Elder Lucy Smith. And because I believe in giving credit where credit is due, a lot of what I'm going to share with you and read to you, I got from the Chicago Public Library. And these, to cite it properly, these are called the Lucy Smith Collier Papers. You can go look it up for yourself, or you can just sit back and let me share it with you. But Elder Lucy Smith was born as Lucinda Madden on a plantation in Woodstock, Georgia, on January 14th, 1875. Her family, which consisted of her mother, 5 siblings, they all lived in an impoverished one-room, not one-bedroom, one-room log cabin, which I'm sure wasn't a far stretch back in those days. But in 1896, Lucy Madden married William Smith. And the couple moved to a nearby farm, where in 1898, the couple had their first of 9 children. 9. Y'all know people don't have that many children. Like that as frequently as they did back then. But 9 children, I can't imagine. In 1908, the family moved from Woodstock to Athens, Georgia, where William Smith abandoned the family. Can you imagine? To have 9 children back then, and for your husband to leave you with 9 babies. But Lucy took in sewing to support her children in Athens and later in Atlanta. Faring no better in Atlanta, she had moved to Athens. Her and all her children moved from Athens, and they went to Chicago. They arrived in Chicago on May 1st, 1910. But then William, who had we just heard left the family, William remained in Athens, but then he rejoined the family in Chicago until his death in 1938. So we can talk about him leaving, but let's also mention William coming on back home. I guess he went out there in them streets and figured out there's no place like home and came on back. But Lucy was a Baptist since age 12. I can identify with that. And in Chicago, she affiliated with Olivet Baptist Church and then briefly with Ebenezer Baptist Church. But in 1912, she left the Baptist faith and altogether joined Stone Church, a predominantly white Pentecostal assembly at 37th Street and Indiana Avenue. I can identify with that to some degree. Being raised from after we left denominationalism, I was around 12 or 13 years old. And then my dad started Ambassadors for Christ Fellowship Center in Havelock, North Carolina. And because we were located near a military base, it was multiracial, interfaith, interdenominational, and multicultural. So I can identify. This is one reason why I chose to tell y'all about Lucy. There were so many things as I continue to share with you about her that I could identify with. But she joined that church, the Pentecostal Assembly Church, and then she would later model her own church called All Nations Pentecostal Church. I want to get that right. All Nations Pentecostal Church after Stone Church. So she modeled her church after Stone Church. And her church was also racially mixed. So y'all think about it. It's 1912, y'all. At Stone Church, Lucy became a convert to Pentecostal worship and beliefs, and particularly faith healing, a gift that she would practice within a few weeks of attending Stone Church. Now, y'all know they're faith healers, I could say, and I'm not saying their names to throw shade or to be impartial, but we know their names. We know black and white men, faith healers. We know white women, faith healers. But I hadn't heard of Elder Lucy Smith until some years ago. But sensing to start her own ministry, Lucy Smith left Stone Church and formed a small prayer band in 1916. I can also identify with that because my dad's church started in our home with just a few people. So she started with two other women in her home on Langley Avenue, from which grew the Langley Avenue All Nations Pentecostal Church in 1918. Largely a tent mission in the early 1920s, the church moved around frequently. I can identify with that because we started our ministry on our home, and then we moved to what was an old ceramic shop that we had to clean out. I mean, literally clean out, dust and all flying everywhere. It was a little cinder block building, and the walls would sweat and sometimes short out the electric box while we were in church. But I understand what it means to have to move because of growth and advancement. And so she moved frequently. And in December 1926, All Nations began to worship at a building at 3716 Langley Avenue, the first church ever built by a woman pastor in Chicago. You hear me? The first church ever built by a woman pastor in Chicago, and the first new construction of a church building by African Americans in over 2 decades. With the help of a small band of saints, quote unquote, by the 1930s, the church grew astronomically, reporting having as many as 5,000 members and becoming a legend on the South Side. Y'all know the South Side, where Michelle Obama comes from? Yeah, that South Side. Smith was known for being a faith healer who claimed to have healed over 200,000 people. All Nations Pentecostal Church was also instrumental in providing food and clothing to thousands of Chicagoans through the Great Depression, and charity for impoverished Black families in Bronzeville. All Nations was known for its spectacular gospel music, which could be heard at the church or, listen to this, through its radio broadcast program, which began in 1933. The Glorious Church of the Air was the name of the program. The first live worship program to ever broadcast from a Black church. Do you hear me? The first live, I'm going to repeat it. The first live worship program to ever broadcast from a Black church. It would air each week until 1955. on WIND, WCFL, and WGES, respectively. The programs fueled the church's charitable resources and drew greater attention to Smith's abilities as a spiritual faith healer. It was heard as far away as Mexico and would often result in letters coming in from all over the country, people telling of how they had been healed as she prayed. Now let's pause. Let me put a pin in that right. It wasn't no internet. She didn't have Googleations and YouTubeiticus. There was no internet marketing drip campaigns. And she was the first. And people heard about it everywhere. She set the example for churches to be able to broadcast. She had a podcast, y'all, and a radio show. The radio program also helped fund the tremendous charity work of the church, and the Glorious Church on the Air set the pace and the format for live broadcast worship services and helped spawn a number of similar programs by other churches in the late 1930s and 1940s. They used Elder Smith's example. The first Black woman to pastor a major congregation in Chicago, Elder Lucy Smith led a congregation that included a significant amount of whites and other minorities, as well as people from various social economic levels. From its inception, All Nations was almost exclusively administered by women. SistaNistas, y'all, which was a sharp contrast to the more mainline Black churches in Bronzeville, where women's ministry and leadership was largely opposed. One of the other, let's put a pin in that, one of the other readings I was able to explore about Elder Lucy Smith was how men came against her, and they pretty much went Pauline about the Apostle Paul talked about women being silent in the church, and you need to understand who he was talking to and why he had to say that and what that mean. And also that was Paul, not Jesus. But I'm going to keep going because I'm going from sharing to meddling. But anyway, they had it in for Elder Lucy Smith because, again, most of the churches were led by men, and she was just, they fought against her. But nevertheless, All Nations and Elder Lucy Smith formed fellowships with the other Black churches in Bronzeville. Instead of her taking and becoming bitter and stopping her work that she felt God had called her to do, she used it as an opportunity to network. Y'all know we go to network meetings now and people get together and you put people in your network and all those good things. She set the tone. Listen, you're going to come against me, but I'm going to reach out to you because we can do this better together. This ain't in the reading. This is TracyMac. But let me go back to the reading. But Elder Lucy formed fellowships with other Black churches in Bronzeville, including institutional AME with Reverend Mary G. Evans, who was also, of course, a female pastor of Cosmopolitan Community Church to be exact, and the Reverend Joseph Evans of Metropolitan Community Church, the Reverend Joseph Branham of South Shore Baptist Church, the Reverend J.C. Austin of Pilgrim Baptist Church, and the Reverend Clarence Cobbs of First Church of Deliverance. I began to think, the more I read about Elder Lucy, and I will continue to share, but I began to think, why didn't we know her name? Why don't we know her name among other notable pastors and faith healers and radio broadcasters, especially being the pioneer of it, and women pastors? Why don't we know her name among philanthropists and community activists, community organizers? Maybe because I've come to know, after studying some things about Elder Lucy Smith, that there was a historian named Wallace Best who noted several sources from the 1930s. And some of these sources put a disparaging light on Elder Lucy Smith. For one, they said, as many other female religious leaders, she's plain, she's buxom, she's plump, and she's brown, and she's homely. And they also commented on her deep voice. I could take issue with that because I'm not a flamboyant person. Some people call me plain. That buxom just means she's a thick SistaNista. Plump and brown. Called her homely. And then, as according to historian Wallace Best, somebody by the name of Samuel Strong, who I was told was a politician, he concluded that women preachers were mannish, overweight, hoarse, and as usual, they must be lesbian. You thinking? Your wheels turning? She can't be good and just be a woman. Oh, because she's hoarse, she must be a lesbian. She shouldn't be a preacher or a pastor at all, because women should be silent in the church. And then, if we can bring the language to New Day, it's almost like the character Mr. in the movie and the play, The Color Purple, when Mr. was talking about Miss Celie. You can't be like Suge, because Suge was fair-skinned, but Miss Celie was dark-skinned. He said, because you're black and you're ugly. These are things that Elder Lucy Smith had to face in just answering the call of God on her life. Yeah, the sexism, the racism, all of that. But she pressed on. Sometimes it's alluded to that Elder Lucy Smith, the reason why they said she was hoarse and mannish and whatever, because she boldly proclaimed a message within the gospel of Jesus Christ that she preached and taught and shared, that people should just be themselves. Just be yourself, she's quoted to saying frequently. She was known to have little regard for correct grammar, even when she tried to orate. But sometimes she would just calmly talk and move around and touch people as she ministered and taught. But when she prayed for the sick, all manners of sickness and disease would be healed. There were people bearing witness. And what she lacked in God's eyes, as some say, and what she lacked in man's eyes, as some say, God compensated for the proof and the power and the love that she exuded for people in her community. The healing services of All Nations Pentecostal Church were phenomenal. Elder Lucy Smith would hold healing services 3 times a week. The deaf, the blind, the crippled, the lame, stroke victims, and those with goiters and cancers were healed weekly. The basement of the church was decorated with crutches and canes of the many who had been healed. Lucy traveled across the state of Illinois and abroad, taking God's healing power and seeing several hundreds of people healed and saved. She was popular with people of all classes and all colors who would come from near and far. Elder Lucy died in 1852. According to the Chicago Defender, Smith's funeral was the largest funeral at that time in Chicago's history, with an estimated of 60,000 paying their respects. Again, y'all, this ain't social media. Even in the 1952 newspapers, you get 1 or 2 here, but news wasn't traveling as fast as it does now, and television and from state to state, and there wasn't an interconnected fiber optics broadcasting this. But when the word got out that she passed, I don't know if there were people who had been healed. I don't know if there were people that she had helped clothe and feed. I don't know if people that she had helped let them be themselves. I don't know if it was her ability to be an inclusionist, to welcome people and pastor people of all socioeconomic backgrounds and races. But they reported over 60,000 people came. Her body laid in state at her home at 3810 South Parkway. An A.A. Rayner's Chapel and All Nations Pentecostal Church. An estimated 50,000 people lined the streets to watch a 75-car procession to the Lincoln Cemetery, where Smith was buried beside her husband and several of her children. She was survived by 3 of her children, Ardella, Henry, and John. Now, if we forgot, and I say we, She had 9 children. So in the midst of all of this, she survived all but 3. That means 6 of her children passed away. What it must have been to be a mom. Sometimes it's even hard being a mom nowadays. And we got quick stuff, microwaves, cars, computers, things to help us do things faster that Elder Lucy Smith did not have access to. None of what I've been able to read explains the causes of her other 6 children's death. But she had to grieve for whatever reason. Children, y'all know it just don't sit right for a mama to lose her baby, but to lose 6, and I don't care at what age, they still are babies. So her surviving children are Della, Henry, and John. But a few years prior to her death in the late 1940s, Elder Lucy Smith relinquished control of all nations to her youngest daughter, the Reverend Ardella Smith. I can identify with that as well, because sometimes preachers, pastors, and even CEOs of companies don't have the wherewithal to pass the baton properly to their children or to whomever they're going to pass it to. But she was cognizant and knew better than to pass it while she was yet still alive. And I thank God that my dad did that for me. I did not inherit the physical building of Ambassadors for Christ, but I inherited the spiritual legacy, which to me is what a real ambassador for Christ does. 2 Corinthians 5:20. Be reconciled. And in my ambassadorship, and I thank God, I shunned it for years because my dad founded and pastored Ambassadors from 1981 until 2008. And he attempted to pass the baton to me then, but I didn't want it because I didn't want a pastor like he pastored. I knew the traditional style of pastoring wasn't for me. And because that was being asked of me, I did not want to go into it hypocritical. I didn't want to go into it hating every day because I knew it would be different. But in May 2022, we did the official passing down of the spiritual legacy, and we hosted it at Ambassadors for Christ Fellowship Center, 102 Brown Boulevard. And I'm so grateful for the people that came to support me. So I could identify when we read that Lucy relinquished all control to her daughter. And so in 1955, after Ardella Smith had assumed the role as gone by the wishes of her mother, conflicts over church debt and property ownership led to the split of All Nations Pentecostal congregation. Because you wonder what happened. Elder Lucy Smith did all of this. She passed it on to her daughter. What happens? A lot gets lost in the passing of the baton. If people think somebody else should do it, if people think, oh, this one should be it, or this one should be it, and it's kind of, we can allude it to even like David. David was minding sheep when they came and got him to go fight Goliath. Anybody else but David. In some cases, I know with me, anybody else but Tracy, I'm the youngest of 3, and I'm not the son. So sometimes some of my not wanting to take the baton in the traditional sense, I knew what I was up against. Other people felt a man should take it. Some people felt like my brother, who was never really part of the church in his adult life, should some kind of way. And there are other things that happen. And I'm sure Ardella experienced some of these things too that happened. And people say, if only, and I had it said to my face, if only you were the son. So we figure out how to do it elsewhere. But back to this, the conflicts over church debt and property ownership led to the congregation splitting off. And this also brought an end to the radio broadcast and the ministry of Ardella. Those opposed to Ardella's leadership eventually left and reformed a separate All Nations Pentecostal church, a split. And I can say I'm a witness because my parents decided to divorce and my dad retired as the bishop, that because people didn't like that, the church split. Some people remain there and I love and like them and still go back and visit them, make my due diligence to support in areas where I've been asked to come back and support, to go and visit and even pay respect when some of the members who were there when we were there have passed on. I'm looking forward to some of that relationship effort being more mutual. But anyway, I thank God they love and like me, and I love and like them too. But I get it. And this is why Elder Lucy Smith's story and Ardella's story resonated with me so highly, I guess. But they opposed her leadership and split off. And then Ardella, I don't know, because there's not a lot written about her from this perspective, but she converted to Catholicism and started a successful catering business called Vogue Catering. She was like, y'all go ahead. I'm going to head on out and I'm going to just do something else. And I can identify with that, even though I've never converted to Catholicism. The time I have spent away from being involved in traditional church services, taking my services into corporations, taking them into schools and universities, taking them into small businesses. I can identify. I didn't go Catholic, and I don't have a problem with that, because the universalism that's involved in Catholicism, I embrace it all. So I didn't choose to go to one. I looked at all different ones, even my time in Japan. And I would go with my coworkers sometimes to lunch, and they would stop off at the temple, whether they were Buddhists or believed in Shintoism. Some of them believed in ancestry worship. And even one of my great friends is Muslim. And I just began to look at all different faiths. And as a chaplain, you have to. And I've been a chaplain for years, and you still have the privilege to embrace your own and have those beliefs in what you believe. But when you begin to see that there are truths that exist in all of them, yeah, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. There's some extremes I will never embrace. But when I see those commonalities, because I'm one of those people to say, let's see how we agree. And we can vibe on that. Let's see how we agree. And there's so many areas, and even being raised in interdenominational spaces, there's so many areas I can agree. But Ardella was like, I'm all the way out. And so her Vogue catering business was pretty successful enough to sustain her. But as for the building that her mom, Elder Lucy Smith, built, which was the first Black woman pastored church built in Chicago, and then the first Black church built in Chicago in 20 years, that building located on 1518 Oakwood Boulevard, which housed the All Nations Church beginnings in the late 1930s. Y'all know, you want to know what happened? The entire east wall of the church mysteriously collapsed in the 1950s. And this was what had been a beautiful modernistic structure. It wasn't some little jackleg lean-to. This was a huge modernistic structure, and mysteriously, the whole east wall collapsed. I'm going to just leave that right there, because that's exactly what it says. And I'm not going to add one jot, one tittle, or take one away. But one of Chicago's most gifted artists, Lucy Smith Collier, grew up in All Nations Pentecostal Church. She was the granddaughter of Lucy Smith. So Lucy Smith Collier was the granddaughter of Elder Lucy Smith. Lucy Smith Collier was born to Elder Lucy's eldest daughter, Viola, and her husband, James Austin, in 1924. Just 2 years later, Viola passed in 1926. That was Lucy's daughter, one of those of her 6 of her 9 children who passed away. So at the age of 2, Lucy served as a little Miss Mascot to the Smith Jubilee Singers, which her father included her father James and her aunt Ardella. So her dad and her aunt pulled her in as a little mascot, and she could sing. First called Little Lucy by her grandmother, who she was named after, Lucy Collier demonstrated a phenomenal talent for music at a young age. Trained at the Chicago Musical College, Little Lucy desired to become a classical musician. When asked by her grandmother to join the work of All Nations, however, she willingly surrendered that goal. By the age of 12, she was assigned responsibility of directing the music at All Nations. I can identify with that. There were some aspirations I had. I attended college And I stayed for a year, but because I got sick, and then the pull for the ministry for me to come back because I left a vacuum in the music department and in the church administration. Yeah, at 18 and 19 years old, that's how active I was in ministry. The music department, I taught the choir, praise and worship. I've never been a musician, but I could pluck out enough chords to get the musicians to go, and then I left school and went back and rejoined supporting my family's ministry. So I can identify with little Lucy Collier. When you're asked to be a part of the ministry, there's a pull and there's a struggle. And, so I went back and she did and directed the music. But in her teens, Lucy Smith Collier formed the Lucy Smith Singers, which included Gladys Beeman Gregory, Catherine Campbell, and Sarah McKissick Simples, later called the Doo-Wop Girls, because of their particular harmonious sound. The group sang and recorded music into the late 1950s. Songs like Come Unto Me, Jesus Lover of My Soul, Down on My Knees were just 3 of their signature songs. And by 1948, at the age of 24, Lucy had already published her first song, What a Blessing in Jesus I Found. I can identify with that. I published my first song at 21 years old. The worshipers packed in all nations just to hear her sing, Tell Jesus All. Though primarily an organist, Lucy Smith Collier's classically trained soprano voice captivated the congregation. The music of All Nations Pentecostal Church was the central part of its ministry and was the star and the light. And within the Baptist Church, the blues intonation, the jazz rhythms, she made an amalgamation of all of the different musics that she had grown to know and love and pulled them together. And I can say the same. Pull a little bit of jazz, some gospel, R&B, different, even dissonance in music. I get you. I feel you, little Lucy. And a choir of 100 voices sang off enthusiastically, but in a down-home manner. That old school. And they sing a song, Ain't That Good News. And they even choreograph some moves to their songs. I can identify with that too. Oh, ain't nothing like a choir. Come on, let's pull into that Ricky Dillard movement or that Orlando Draper. Yeah, you get them to moving. I can identify with so much. This is why the life of Elder Lucy Smith and little Lucy Collier resonated with me so. But after the death of Lucy Smith, Elder Lucy Smith Collier joined the Roberta Martin Singers, and in addition to singing and playing the piano for the group, she arranged most of their music. I can identify with that, writing original music at the different churches I've been a part of, not only ambassadors, but as my husband and I moved around. Whenever we went to a church, I did the theme song and the welcome song for another church and did some other original music. So I get it. And when she arranged original music, one of the songs is called I Do Believe and My Lord and Master. I wish I could have played, but you can't. Some of the songs I haven't been able to find, but the ones I have been able to find, the recordings are really cloudy and, can you imagine? And then the other ones, of course, because of copyright infringement, I can't play them for you. So you can go Google them and find them. But while a member of the Roberta Martin Singers, she played for a number of years for the Barrett Singers and was an integral part of both groups as they reached national and even international acclaim. The crowning achievement in her career, this is little Lucy Collier, in 1981, was a ceremony in Washington, D.C., where they inducted most of her gospel songs into the Smithsonian Institute. I am so grateful that you have taken out time just to listen to me share with you about Elder Lucy Collier and the life she led as a leader, a faith healer, a pastor, a Black woman, a spiritual healer, a community activist, a servant leader, a woman who was talked about, who had to deal with the oppression of not being welcomed, but still rising above it to do what she believed God has called her to do, or God had called her to do. And even using those opportunities of rejection to rally churches together and network and say, we can do this better together. To be the first to have a radio broadcast that other churches begin to use as an example that probably led to even what we do now. She was the first, and I honor you. I honor the life of Elder Lucy Smith, and I thank God for you being an example in our Black HERStory. And if nothing else, we say your name. We say your name, Elder Lucy Smith, and we thank God for you. I thank God for being an example for me, if nothing else, that when we face opposition, to figure out ways to pull people together and to say to everybody, it's okay to be yourself. I'm TracyMac. I'm grateful, and I love y'all for real. Much love and peace.
Peace Place for Me, a virtual connection where the contagious love of Jesus Christ abides and thrives. We are an exclusive community purposed to enhance and expand spiritual and holistic growth to advance the kingdom of God. We get to enjoy life more abundantly in peace. You are welcome to join Pastor and Chaplain TracyMac in this virtual, interfaith, inclusive, and purpose-filled community. For access to join our virtual meetings, email us at peace@blackwomensworld.com. That is, peace@blackwomensworld.com. Or you can reach us at our website, www.peaceplaceforme.com. We look forward to seeing you.
You've been listening to Black Women's World Podcast, the BWWP, brought to you in part by TracyMac Solutions for Life Institute, coaching and training services. No doubt you have enjoyed being in our world, and it doesn't have to stop here. Head on over to blackwomensworld.com. This is my personal invitation to you to stay connected with me on social media and more. I'd love to see you there, and I'm so grateful you came to be with me here. Invite someone else to join you in our queendom next time so they can feel the vibe of our tribe of SistaNistas and SistaNista lovers too. Remember to be kind, be authentic, be generous, be excellent, be grateful, and while you're at it, go ahead and be extraordinary, because that's just what SistaNistas do, on purpose through mission with passion and compassion. It's a Black woman's world, baby, and you, my SistaNista, are proof. I'm your self-discovery companion, your professional peacemaker, and your host, TracyMac. Wherever you are in the world, may you love and be loved by somebody. Peace.